mentioned, and we're just going to give as the Lord would have us to lead here in this offering, and just pray that God's will be done. Let's go forward in prayer. Father, we thank you for your love. We thank you for your blessings. There's so much to be thankful for, Father. Lord, I pray that you be with Brother Adam as he brings the message tonight, and just brings your word to us to follow. Lord, help us just to give us the listening ears you'd have us to hear, so that we may take away from your word what you'd have us to learn and apply to our lives. Lord, I just pray that you just continue to be with Karen at this time, and we just pray that you would heal, Lord. Just give doctor's wisdom. Don't have to treat her, Father, Lord, and back on her feet, back to serving you like she desires to, Father. With our church, Lord, as we continue to seek it, Pastor, Lord, if it be your will, let us know, have peace about Brother David Cook, Father. Be with him, Father, Lord, as he prays as well, that he seeks your will. We just want your will to be done, Father, Lord. Thank you. We love you. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Let's just make sure we stay in prayer for Miss Karen, for Jaleel. It's a tough time. So today we're going to talk about, the title of this sermon is called Rock of My Foundation. There's a song we sing, Brother Phil sings, Jessica and I, for the kids. It's Jesus is the Rock. Jesus is the rock of my foundation. His banner over me is love. The kids do it, y'all. Very easy. All right, so it's a song we sing, and it's all about Jesus being our firm foundation, about us having a refuge and security in the Lord. Because we have an issue as people, as fallen people. We have an issue where we have a tendency to look for security in ourselves or in things of this world. But the world can't provide us with real security, cannot give us a real foundation. And we ourselves cannot protect ourselves from this world, and we cannot provide ourselves with any firmness on which to plant our feet on. It's in the Lord that happens. And today we're going to be talking from Psalm 46. Psalm 46. We'll do the whole psalm. And this is a psalm of joy, a song of joy and elation. Now we're going to read it, and it's going to sound not quite that way. So Psalm number 46. I'll let you get there. So this psalm, and I'll give you a little background as we get there. This psalm was a song of celebration relating most likely to 2 Chronicles 20, where we had Jehoshaphat, the king of Israel at the time, facing a very dire situation. He was facing a very tough time. So Jehoshaphat was there. Jehoshaphat and his priests and his people and were facing a very difficult issue. So let's read this psalm here. So Psalm 46 goes, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar with foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Verse 8, come, behold the work of the Lord. Now he has brought desolation on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Let us pray real quick. And gracious Heavenly Father, just thank you for this time in your house, Father. This privilege to speak in your word. Father, I just pray that these words fall in the ears of this congregation and prick their hearts and move them into the direction you're pushing, Father. Just give us clarity, mind, and open hearts to receive your word and truth. And just give us the strength to carry out any command we get today. Father, I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So again, we're talking here about a couple of things. And the most important thing to realize is this psalm is of joy. Joy in the heart. So we go back, we're going to talk about 2 Chronicles 20. So Jehoshaphat's king. And he is looking down the barrel of a gun in many senses. And it was a really bad day for Jehoshaphat and the people of Israel. Now Jehoshaphat was a godly king. And we all know when we read Chronicles and we read the book of Kings and Judges, there's a cycle to it. It's up and down. They're not all good. But Jehoshaphat was a good one. So he prays to the Lord in 2 Chronicles in verse 20 about an imminent threat. The imminent threat is he had the Moabites, the Ammonites, and the Edomites all bearing down together on Israel. They were coming to attack God's people. They look out the gate of the watchtower of the gate and they saw 3 armies coming at them to invade. And the Lord answered when they prayed, because he prayed. The priests prayed. The singers prayed. The Lord answered them. And when they awoke and they looked out the guard tower, the enemy encampment was obliterated. There was not a man standing against Israel. While they slept, the Lord took care of everything. But the details, it's a little more into the details, because when we look at 2 Chronicles 20, they weren't lamenting as they prayed. They were joyous as they prayed. They never doubted for 1 second the presence of the Lord in their nation. They never doubted it for a second. There was not fear. There was elation. Because the Lord had always promised to be with them. The Lord had promised to deliver them from their attackers, and he did that. And now we see a response. We see even more joy in Psalm 46 as their trust paid off. As trust in the salvation that the Lord had promised them paid off. And we have salvation too. The Lord is always promising to be with us, and the Lord saves us from everything. Because remember, the Lord sent his Son to save all men. We have a picture of a specific instance where the Lord came and saved his children. And we have a bigger picture in the gospel of where the Lord came and delivered all of us who choose to accept that gift. So the psalm speaks of fearlessness because of God's presence. The foundation of trust we have in God, and the very way we should approach God when he delivers us from those things that would harm us. So in verses 1 through 3, we look at the idea that God's presence is with us and with us always. The very first line is, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. That right there, I think we could talk about all night. Because God is with us, we have nothing to fear. So the psalmist here, the writer of the psalm was Jahaziel. Here, the psalmist begins with a declaration of trust and belief in the presence of God with the Israelite people. He identifies God as a God who is there in times of trouble, in times of great distress. His presence is for those who seek Him in their lives, and He is faithful to reveal Himself in those times. He is there to comfort His children. If we are faithful to Him, He is faithful to us. And we can look into the New Testament. We can look at the picture of this when we have fear. We're told by Jesus in John 14, verses 1 through 4, He talks about, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you that I go prepare a place for you. If not, I would not told you. I would have told you that I go prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you there myself, that where I am you may also be, and you will know the way to where I'm going. The first line of that passage is, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. And that's what's talking about here in verse 1. The very present, God is very present of times of trouble. Don't trouble your hearts. If you believe in God, don't have trouble in your hearts, because He's there with you. And it's explained here in the psalm, in what I can only imagine was an extremely scary situation. Right, that picture the psalmist gives us is one of, I would say it is very, very scary. Because he would not fear, right? Therefore, we will not fear, because God's with us, if the earth gives way. Could you imagine down this aisle if the earth just gave way? Who would be scared? I would, because it's right in front of me. Kids are on this side. Right? If the mountains move to the heart of the sea, we're in Texas, there's no mountains or seas, so we get back to that one. The waters roar and foam, and the mountains tremble and swell. Now what we're talking about here is something, I don't know about y'all, would scare the daylights out of me if everything started going crazy. But the picture here is the reversal of creation. Think about the creation story, how God built everything, and the light, and the world, and He put the seas, and He made the land and the dry land, and He separated everything. Now, the picture here is that being undone. But the psalmist talks about, hey, I believe in God. I'm a child of God, so no matter if He undoes creation, my very strength and refuge, I am safe in the presence of the Lord. And we have that too. That is us. We are in that secure presence right now. The psalmist is so convicted of the faithfulness of God as towards His people that he's saying he would not bat an eye if the world came undone and the seas raged to the point where they were just foaming up all over the place. Because when he saw that what the Lord did for His people, for the Israelites, when He saved them from not one, not two, but 3 armies bearing down on the city, he knew who he could trust in. Because to the psalmist, the world appeared to be ending. To the psalmist, when you look out your front door, your front gate, and you see imminent doom, from that perspective, it looks like it's just a matter of time till it's all over. But as children of God, He is with us in these times of trouble. Like the promised tabernacle. We see the picture in the tabernacle in the Exodus story, where the people are going through and they have the pillar of fire and the pillar of smoke with them, guiding them. And they have God dwelling with them in the ark, in the tabernacle, right, in the tent. God always makes an effort to be with us. God always promises He's going to be with us. In the Old Testament, even in the garden, after the fall, He made a way to show He was with His people. And He never stopped. And no matter how hard we try, because despite our best efforts, and even saved or not, we still try to distance ourselves from the Lord. I know I do. I know there are times I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's just I get so down and in the dumps, and I just feel sorry for myself, and I don't know if anybody's like me. That's just me. I go through those times, those spells of just feeling bad, and I get my own way. I get my own way, and I distance myself from the Lord, but He always wants to be with us. He always wants to be with me when I'm trying to go through that, when I'm going through those times. So in the good or bad, we have a dwelling place in our hearts for God if we accept Jesus. And that's the beautiful thing. We don't have to lug around a big heavy ark anymore. There used to be a table down here, a good example. You know, I bet you that thing was burdensome, and only like 12 people in the whole nation could touch it anyway. I'm sure that was a little daunting to lug that thing around the desert for 4 years. But it was a promise. He was there. That was a visual image, knowing that He was there, right? And now we have an image branded on our hearts from the cross to know now that Jesus, if we accept Him, Jesus is with us. God is with us in our hearts wherever we dwell. So in times of trouble, He is with us. So God came to Israel in time of dire straits, and God proved that He was bigger than all of that. Because if we look into verses 4 and 7, we see that God is our firm foundation. We have a picture here in verses 4 and 5. We're talking about a river, right? There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God, a holy habitation of the Most High. The psalmist really changes his tone here. We go from the world melting away to a nice happy river flowing. So why the change? Why such a big change in tone? We have a picture that I think relates right back to Genesis 2 and 10. The river that feeds the garden, right? That continuous, abundant flow of water into the garden that gives it life and sustains it. And that's from God. So we have this picture of stability and tranquility. In times of trouble, we can always know that there is a stable, tranquil God there for us. So where God dwells, where God habitates, His house is always happy and is always abundantly supplied. It will never go without. The ground never shakes and is present, and He will always be present to ensure that His house stays firmly planted. Because God's foundation is the source of all abundance and all of creation. So because that pure, loving happiness of God can be found in His grace, which is abundant. And we have a place there. We have a place and a citizenship within this holy city, right? The city of God, the holy habitation Most High, where God is in the midst of, that will not be moved, will not be shaken. No matter how much trouble goes on around us, in our hearts where we keep God, where He dwells with us, can be firm and strong and anchored into His foundation. And it will be there every morning, right? God will help her when morning dawns. God will help us every morning. No matter how big the trouble is, God is there. We have a place there. That is our citizenship. That is our household. We are the children of God. I get this picture of children running around the house, right? I have a 6-year-old, Levi. I got to tell him to stop running in the house because he hits everything and stubs his toes. I hear him crying in the middle of the floor. Can't run in the house, buddy. But he's having fun, right? I did it when I was a kid, and a lot of us did. We're running around our house, and we're having a fun time, and made me think of I had this Aunt Catherine. She was a very rich lady. She lived in this big house, a mansion. It was actually bought by one of the St. Louis Rams years and years and years ago. The football player bought her house. And I remember loving going there, because it was just massive place. It was endless. I could run and play and just run upstairs. There was like 3 or 4 stories, and I just could go into a dead sprint for 3 or 4 hours and never see a person. That's what it felt like anyway. Except one room, the open foyer. It was a grandfather clock, and it echoed and scared the Jesus out of me. So I avoided that side of the house. But that was such a good memory of me running around. And that's what I think of that stability, being in God's city, in God's house, and that firm foundation, being able like a child to run again. But I'm also not naive sitting up here. I know there's people here right now that did not have a childhood like that. That's a foreign thought. A loving father and a house that's fun. But I'm going to tell you right now, anybody here that never experienced that, you will. And that psalm tells us this. So much of the Bible tells us this. So much of the redemptive story of the Bible, of what the history of the Bible tells us, is that one day, no matter how hard things have been in this world, we have a home and a firm foundation that one day we're going to get to experience that. And even those who have experienced it are going to experience it in a way that you've never had before. You know, talking about these things can bring anxiety to people. But it's not the case in God's house, as God's children. It is going to be a place of elation, of joy, of happiness that you've never experienced, that none of us have. His words say it here, the happiness in His city is never ending. His word tells us that He will be with us and He will help us all the way. Because His word came to this world. His word came to this world in flesh and made a way for us to enjoy this condition that is completely foreign to all of us. So let us not forget that. Let us not sleep on that. Let us not get tied up in the worries in the world. Let's not focus on the enemy or the trouble, and focus on the Savior. Focus on the strength provider, the refuge, the one with us in trouble. Because when we abide in Him, when we are with Him, when we are part of Him, He abides in us. And when we go to John 15:4, we see this. We see this picture in the New Testament where Jesus is talking again. He says, abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. Right? You cut a branch off of a tree, cut a branch off an apple tree, it's not going to grow apples very long, is it? It's useless. Verse 5, I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered and thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me, my word abide in you. Ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. A lot of people stop there. A lot of people like that one. There's a bunch of people. But my Father, by this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. In verse 9, as my Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, right? This really refers back to verse 7 here. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. Because the question is, how do we get to this house? How do we stay in this holy habitation, this happy place? How do we continue to keep the Lord in our presence? Because the Lord is justified, even in his own children, to discipline us. At times when we draw away, because there's two sides of this, of the coin. At times we draw away, the Lord is justified to discipline us, to pull us back. I think about it, you ever seen those parents that have their kids on leashes? You seen them? And they get away and come back. That can't be comfortable. I can't imagine that.
That was really not.
He gets mad at leash. Or you're anybody pulling your collar to pull you back, or it's not comfortable when you're going one way and someone's pulling you another way. That's uncomfortable, and I really think that's the crux and the real good visual of what it means for the Lord to discipline. When you're trying to run away, he's pulling you back, and then you're getting into a tug of war with the Lord, and I don't think that's going to work. You're not going to be happy with the end result. It's just going to wear you out, and you're going to be frustrated. But all it tells us here is if we abide in him, if we follow his commands, if we love him, we can ask him whatever we want. He will be with us whenever we need him. He will always be faithful to deliver us from those times that are tough and unbearable and that we cannot manage on our own. And he uses that illustration of the vine. I think of the tree. I have these trees in my backyard. And every now and again, a branch falls. And I always look at it, it's all withered. And it seems like it's already been pretty much disconnected from the tree. But you see some of these branches, they're in that tree, and they're in there, and they are firm. And no matter how hard the wind blows, those branches will whip around, but they're not going anywhere. Because you can look up there where the branch meets the trunk, and it's just real, real thick. It's real in there. I don't know the correct term. And that's kind of what I think of when I look at this passage and this psalm is when we're that fused with God, when we're that integrated with the Spirit of God, there's nothing that can overtake us. There's nothing that can betray our trust and nothing that will betray God's trust and love us. No matter how hard the wind blows, no matter how many trials and tribulations we go through, no matter how much it seems so shaky, right? Think about the branch swinging. If you put a camera on a branch in a windstorm, what looks like it's swinging, the world or the branch? It'll look like the world's swaying, right? From the branch's perspective. So when we are the ones moving, when we are the ones getting pushed around, it looks like the world's in chaos. But when we're firmly implanted in the Lord, we can trust that we're not going to go anywhere, no matter how hard we're pushed. And that's what John 15 talks about. That's what the psalm here, 46, verses 6 and 7 talk about. Because no matter how hard the wind blows, the nation rage, or the world attacks us, we are protected by his hand. We are encircled in his fortress, right? The God of Jacob is our fortress, the ancient God, the God of before time. Right? Even when we look back into the first part in verses 2 and 3, the creation being undone, which will happen if you read the back of the book, we are secure and set upon this firm foundation. We know exactly what our fate will be. And we know that all this leads to one critical thing, one ultimate end goal. And it's not necessarily always for our own joy. It's not always just for our protection. The whole point of this, the whole reason we were made, was so that God can be exalted, so that God can be glorified. And in this psalm, he talks about this. It starts going back into the verse 2 and 3. Here, verse 8 kind of talks about the world being brought to desolation and the wars ceasing because he's going to break the bows and shatter the spears and burn the chariots. Again, we get to that war imagery, that fighting imagery, right? Because no matter how bad the world, and especially our culture here in America, wants God to be an imaginary figure, they're going to be wrong and they're going to be disappointed. I don't know how many shows I've seen, how many different, popular culture ideas I've seen where God is treated like a cartoon character, or a lazy dad, or just, a watchmaker or some kind of guy that just sets the universe in motion and just lets it go. A neglectful parent. There's so many images of God that aren't from the Bible. It's just a popular culture idea that diminishes God into this cartoon or this imaginary figure, so that the people who don't believe don't feel guilty about the way they live. But they're going to be disappointed because the whole idea of this is so God can be exalted. So God will bring those who threaten his people to their knees, and he will remake this world into a world of pure joy and eternal worship of himself without the pain of sin causing us to continually stumble over our own feet. Like I said before, I get in my own way a lot. I'm the one that causes myself to stumble in a lot of ways. I know the devil works real hard to keep us from doing anything good. But I sometimes, I give him a hand, I think, sometimes. I seem to do as much damage as he does in my own life. And I think maybe that's true of all of us. I don't know. It's easy to get in our own ways and think of ourselves before anybody else. And there's going to be a day when that's not going to be an issue. Because to the things that are brought against us for serving in the name of the Lord are nothing against the Lord, are nothing to stop them. I think of those pop guns. Anybody ever have a pop gun when they're a kid? You know, one of those? So little pop guns, they don't do nothing, they just make a noise, right? So anybody ever have a pop gun? Ever tried to like stop a bully with it? Or a mean older brother? Did it? You think it did anything? Did it make them madder? And really, and I don't want to compare God to a bully or a mean older brother, but that's the only thing that this world can bring against the Lord. A pop gun. It's not going to do anything to him. It's not going to frustrate his efforts. He is going to succeed and be victorious in his efforts. Because these weapons, all the weapons in the world, are literally and figuratively going to be reduced to dust as we, as his children, can walk securely in the Lord's city and have him walk with us and feel secure. And I say figuratively because there are a lot of weapons that are used against us as believers today that we can't really see, but we can feel the pain of. There's a lot of laws. There are a lot of ordinances. There's the court of public opinion that really goes against anybody who faithfully believes in the Lord. And those things can really have a big effect on our psyche, on our emotions and our faith. But the Lord walks with us. You see, these words aren't put in the Bible for no reason. They're put here to say that, you know, even back then when this was written 2,500 years ago, to tell us right now, I know you're going through troubles. You may not have 3 armies marching on your door, but you have a lot of different fights going on. But I'm here, as the Lord's telling us. He's telling us he's here with us, and he's going to be faithful and present in our troubles. So the Lord speaks here and confirms this when we see in verse 10, this is the Lord speaking. He tells us that he will be exalted, he will win, that he will be known. Because he is our fortress, our comfort, our peace, our joy, and our abundance. We get it all from him. We know this, and we bow down to him in our hearts and our minds and our lives as believers. And that is great. Us as believers, that is fantastic that we know him, and we bow down to him, and we can trust in him. But there are so many others that each and every one of us know that do not know him as Lord. What about them? Do they have any hope? How are they going to know Jesus? Because we can look at Philippians verses 2 and 10. So that the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven, on earth, and under the earth. And every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of the God the Father. God will be glorified. He will be exalted amongst all the people and all the nations of this earth. Think about that with your friends and with your people. If you know the Lord now, or you're going to know him later. So anybody you know that doesn't know him now will know him eventually. And we'll all bow down and confess it one day. And at that point, it's going to be a little too late. So we do have a battle right now. Like I was saying, we don't have armies marching on our door. I don't have 600-700 people beating down my door to come take me over. But I do have a lot of things. We all have a lot of things that try us, that push us, that threaten us. And we have the promise of the Lord to deliver us from these, to win. And we need to be bold at the side of the Creator and sharing his Son's victory and the peace, love, joy, abundance, security, and firm foundation that come with that. That's what comes with it. It's the whole package. All inclusive. You miss nothing, you get it forever, and it only costs your obedience. We have this refuge. The God who has been since the time of Jacob is our refuge. The God that has been since the time of creation and the God that has been since the time before time. That's one God. Has promised to be with us, protect us, give us a firm footing in this time of trial and tribulation, in this time of persecution, that he will go out in front of us, And it is a song of joy. And I want to look Romans 8:31 real quick. Paul asks a question here. Who can be against us? Paul says, what then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? We can't lose. We won't lose. God won't lose. He will be exalted. So this psalm is a song of joy. It's sung by the Israelites, who before as the persecution was coming, were singing in joy. They saw what God did with their own eyes. He defended them from imminent doom, from certain doom. And I'll just give you a little more background here of Israel at the time. There was maybe about 2 roads in Israel, main roads. There's a lot of little roads. There's 2 roads. There's a front door and a back door. Think of it that way. Their front door had 3 armies coming down it. There's no time to go out the back door. There's no time to get out. The main road was called the King's Highway. It was interesting. So imagine looking out your front door and seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of angry people charging, only to look down for a moment and look up to see them all gone. That's what Israel saw. That's what Jehoshaphat saw. That's what was happening. I mean, these people were camped out in their front lawn, ready to attack at night, and in the morning, they were done for. That's the promise. That's the way God can deliver us. Doom was walking to the front gates of the city, and these people saw what God had done for them, and they were in a state of elation, of joy. And this is a picture of how we should be. We should be looking at what God does for us and has done for us and continues to do for us, and not looking at the things that the devil or the world try to do. We focus on the bad. We focus on the trouble. We don't look at the good that God's doing. That's where our mind needs to be. That's where our eyes and our hearts need to be fixed on the Lord as we go through these times. And then we can have that joy that these people have, that they had no right to. That you would look at and say, how can you be happy when you're about to be killed? Because they knew who was on their side. And we know who's on our side, and that is the Lord. So there is a warning, too, in this, that anybody that comes at the Lord's people are not going to be successful. And we know a lot of people who are lost and a lot of people who come at the Lord's people. And we need to be willing to share the gospel. We need to be willing to share Christ's death on the cross with them. We need to make it a point to get out there and tell them about God. We need to make it a point to invite them to church. Heaven has plenty of rooms. Jesus is up there. Jesus is a carpenter. He'll build more rooms. He's good at it. So let's not worry about space. Let's share. Let's get people into doors, and let's get them saved. That's what we need to do. So I urge everybody here to share the gospel, and I want to encourage each of you to feel that security you have with the Lord, that firm foundation. And find the joy in knowing that no matter what happens, you're in the arms of the Lord, and you are in His fortress, and you are His child. So I'm going to go ahead and dismiss this in prayer. And gracious Heavenly Father, so thank you for this time in your house and this honor to speak on your word, Father. I just pray that everybody here can take home the point of the message and the truth, Father, and be bold as they share the gospel, be joyous in their lives as Christians, as children of you, Father. Just pray that we have a life of happiness and security, knowing you, Father. Just pray that we focus our attention solely on you, and make our lives a living worship and sacrifice, and not dwell in those things that threaten us to harm us, Father. We love you, and we pray in Jesus' precious name.